as well. And so moving right along, tomorrow, I just looked up in the weather, we're supposed to have snow for the next 2 days, so figure it out. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to move right along and finish up chapter 1, okay? So the last part of chapter 1 is not big, but there's just one more piece of it that we need to work with. And let's go right into it. I got this Dell thing. It's in the way. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the last part of this chapter has to talk about what they call their channel strategy framework, or basically what that does is it entails is it kind of encapsulates the ideas about what we're talking about when we're talking about channels and especially the omni-channel in the world. You know from your basic science that an ecosystem basically is described how an entire environment interacts with each other in a sustainable way. Well, an ecosystem in the way that we talk about it is the firm's go-to strategies, associated channels that kind of help interconnect this network together in a successful and sustainable way. In the multi-channel world, what you're talking about is multiple routes to the market. And so what I mean is that the manufacturer basically has multiple ways that they can get to the consumer, okay? So they can use the direct channel to get there. They can use the standard wholesale to retail route to get there. They also might want to go by direct mail to get there. And this is what the multi-channel environment is. The omni-channel basically interacts, develops, and goes further than that by giving you one single entry point, and this is the mobile phone, or let's just say this is what we use mostly, and it basically is our connection into this world, okay? It goes further than that framework because it captures the flow of everything: material, information, financing, promotion, everything across the channel. And it delivers it in an interactive overall brand experience. It's not surprising that Carvana and these other ways are being so successful when it comes to shopping for automobiles, because it encapsulates the whole idea of the omni-channel experience. The experience is much more pleasurable to do it that way versus the traditional way going through, or let's just say going to a dealership and going through the standard negotiating and those kind of things. When Saturn as an automobile corporation came out in 1988, 90, I can't remember where it was sometime in the 90s. One of the things that Saturn did was they streamlined the entire process and gave you the best price possible. And in other words, in terms of negotiating, they took that process out and it made it so much easier for individuals. They basically told you the prices that it cost them for the cars, showed you what the markup was, and showed you what they were getting in return, and people were very happy with that. Well, the omni-channel experience makes that, process of buying a vehicle much more available and desirable. And so when we talk about the omni-channel ecosystem, all you have to do is, if you look at your phone and you're using Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you are, Amazon would be considered an ecosystem. It integrates the domains that you used. It will analyze them separately. It'll connect and coordinate channel intermediaries. eBay did that at the very beginning, and eBay still does that in many respects. And I'm a big eBay fan because I love to buy and sell things across the internet. And I was quite successful doing that for a while, okay? Now, the omni-channel ecosystem has found its way into business to consumer, but it's going to eventually make itself into the business to business environment much deeper than we have now. And how it's quite simply perform all of the same channel functions as done, through the business to consumer, but do it in a business to business way that provides value on both sides, okay? All right, so that's the end of that. And this is just basically a brief chapter review. Just to say, chapter 2 will be what we're going up to next. 3, 4, and 5 is where we talk about conflict, power, and relationships. 6 through 9 are going to be all of the channel intermediaries. And then the last part where we'll focus on the end user. So we start talking about manufacturers. The middle chapters talk about all that stuff that happens in the intermediaries. And then at the bottom, we'll start finally talking about the end user. Okay? That's it with chapter 1. Yeah, chapter 1. Okay. So let us move on and go with chapter 2. All right, folks. One of the things that the last 9 months have done a reasonably good job of talking to us is trying to come up with a conversation of why do we need channels in the first place. And so with all of us who do an enormous amount of shopping on Amazon, and I include myself in that list as well, the things that you kind of ask yourself is, well, why shouldn't manufacturers deal directly with consumers now anyway? Wouldn't consumers, in essence, pick up a bargain if they took themselves out of the constant channel functions and just dealt directly to the manufacturers? And it's a good question, all right? And we're going to deal with that in this class, and especially with this chapter. And we're going to show cases where channels are not just only essential, but the system would break down without them. So before I go on with that, I do want to share a very interesting paper that I was reading today. And I've seen this a couple of times. If you notice, this is January 25th, interesting. And I had been reading about this and wondering because quite simply, folks, when you build systems and you create models, models are built to live within a certain amount of capacity, okay? When I created the internet service providership, we used to say the best thing in the world is uncontrolled growth, and the worst thing in the world is uncontrolled growth. And if you look at the Amazon model with Amazon Prime, certainly you're getting to that idea as well. Is it quite simply every system, when it's strained to its extremes, eventually will break. And I have been keeping up with Amazon shipping costs. I've been going to supply chain magazines and those kind of things. And I've been waiting for this. Amazon is showing a massive jump in shipping costs, all right? Even prior to the pandemic, because I was looking this up as well, you started to see Amazon's in terms of their total, when it comes to their total income versus expenses, you see this line item on there that's called shipping costs, and you can see it starts to go up very gradually. And then of course the pandemic came along and shipping costs are up exponentially. I can't predict the future, but I would not be surprised to see Amazon come along and change the model somewhat. Certainly for y'all, like for students and that, I don't see that changing because Amazon needs you. You're the future. Someone like myself, I can see them ramping up costs quite easily. Another thing that Amazon is in the back of their head is that Amazon basically is making money on the US Post Office. How is that? Why? The US Post Office makes its money, or the primary income that it's generated basically comes with first class mail, which is stamped mail. All right. That's generally how the post office makes its money. The post office, because of the way that they built themselves, actually loses money with every package that they ship. And so, far from thinking that this has been a great thing from the post office, it's actually been a bad thing. Okay, the deficits inside of the post office, owned by us, the people, has grown because, in essence, in a philosophical way, we're paying for Amazon to get rich. All right. I mean, not in a big way, folks. And I don't want to disparage that in a way, because let's face it, Amazon is also creating jobs too. So everything has a balance. But what I'm saying basically here is that quite realistically, the model as it's seen right now eventually has a point where it simply can't succeed. Okay, so that's just a little blurb there. Something that you can see, it's a website called seekingalpha.com. Supply, what is it named? Supplychain.com is another excellent website. Anyway, I'm going on, forgive me. So let's go and start this chapter 2 now. And we're going to explore some of the things about channels. And so, what makes channels so important, even in its traditional sense? Why is channels so valuable? And if I'm talking about channels, I'm talking about, in whatever way we look at the traditional way. The manufacturer at the top. I got a quick grab on this one. This one's always bad. Purple. The manufacturer at the top. Let's put a wholesaler in the middle. Retailer. And then the consumer. And the consumer is always part of marketing channels because they perform channel functions. You're going to get sick of me saying that. So why? Well, quite simply is the fact that the functions that happen with the channels add value to the consumers, and they provide inexplicable value not only to the consumers, but to the manufacturers of wealth, okay? Channel systems have become a competitive asset. And not only that, but good channel functions are not easily replicated by firms, which is a source of sustainable competitive advantage. If I were to ask you what is the number one thing that Walmart has as a strategic asset, I would say certainly it's their supply chain. They're number one, okay? The computer systems within Walmart are second only to the ones that run the United States military. Because of their efficiencies of design, it makes Walmart able to deliver goods at retail at less expense than anyone else. And we'll start talking a little bit about that. In the mid-90s, the early 2000s, Walmart came up with a plan in that they never wanted to have a dry shipment anywhere in the United States. A dry shipment is basically when a truck leaves from one place and goes to another, a Walmart truck that doesn't have something in it. In other words, you're having to take a truck and put it somewhere so that it can move something else. Walmart dedicated themselves to making sure that every truck in the United States that's on the road, that is a Walmart truck, is delivering something. And they succeeded at that. The only corporation in the world. Now, others have copied it, but they did it first and they did it better. And that is a source of sustainable competitive advantage, okay? The other thing realizes that it's important is if the firms adopt less than effective channel strategies, those firms will suffer from a limited reach and an insufficient attractiveness to buyers. We are so connected with Amazon right now because it's so easy just to hit the one click. That's all that it is. Yesterday, I fell victim to it myself. I like to watch Perry Mason. You're going to find this out later. The 50s version, not the one that's on HBO now. And season 4 came up. And it was at a 30% discount. And I hit the one click and I said, I'm going to do this before I think about it. And I did it. So that's an example. Okay. Now, the last one I want to go is to the first one. The central task of marketing is to design and manage a channel structure that ensures that the channel system operates efficiently and effectively. And what that also means is this: if the direct channel is your channel structure, then you must consider and think seriously about that channel as much as if you're using a traditional system. Okay, so those are importance of why we have channel strategies. And folks, remember, strategies mean you think this stuff out. So why do they exist? Okay, and we talk about this again, especially talking about Amazon. Channels are essentially interdependent organizations that act and operate solely on trust, all right? The reason that these channels exist is that they balance the benefits interactively to the end users and their incremental costs. When channels efficiently operate, they bring value by performing tasks for the consumers that ultimately equate to greater value once they're delivered to them. And it's these benefits that intermediaries in the channels provide, both to the manufacturers at the top and the consumers at the bottom, that we need to study. And these are what are known as service outputs. And so service outputs are the benefits that the intermediaries in the channel provide both to the upstream and to the downstream. All right? And so what are they? Let's talk about them one at a time. The first, the benefits to the downstream members. And let's also put the retailers in that classification as well. The first is they facilitate our search, okay? The channels with intermediaries arise very much because they help facilitate the search process. Now, any of you that have gone out and made a purchase, especially if that purchase is a high dollar, understands the risk of making a bad purchase. And because of that, you naturally seek out to have as much information as you possibly can. The first house I ever bought was a condominium in Lafayette. And one of the things that benefited to me, and I was so lucky, is that I had a great real estate agent. I owe so much to her. You know, I'm fresh out, and I mean, I was in my mid-20s, and maybe she looked on me with a little bit of pity and whatever. But, you know, she helped me through the entire process of buying. She pointed out to me that a 15-year contract with a little bit more, ultimately in the long run, is so much more generous. She provided me with the credit reports and told me how I could improve it before I actually bought it. All of those things are part of what's known as the search process. When they help the end users, what it basically allows them is it allows the consumer to buy exactly what is the proper good from the manufacturer, and ultimately the consumer is much more satisfied because the consumer gets exactly what they wish, and the manufacturer has exactly what they want. They have a satisfied buyer. Not only that, one who wants to come back again and again and again. I don't have to tell you, any of you that have bought something that they don't like, or felt like that they haven't been given enough information by someone in the loop, whoever that might be. We all know where we were at that moment, and we know how ticked off we were, okay? So the ability to search, to help with the search process. Not only that, but folks, if these individuals have certain unique competencies that we as consumers don't have, we desire to have those experts point those things out to us as well. And so that's the other thing that the search facilitation does, is it allows us to bring experience into play. Hopefully it's someone that we trust because we've had some form of past experience. So that's the search process. The next is the sorting process, okay? Intermediaries perform the valuable function of sorting goods and resolving the discrepancies between the assortments of goods provided by the manufacturer and those that are demanded by the end user, okay? And so let me talk through this and I'll kind of explain it out, okay? If I'm a manufacturer and I produce a large quantity of a wide variety of goods, then it is vitally important to help my consumer by sorting out those goods into separate stocks that are relatively homogeneous, okay? So Procter & Gamble makes a wide variety of different things. As a matter of fact, many manufacturers do. Now, if I want to be able to compare those goods, however, it's important that I can compare them in a short place or a limited place. And so let me give you an idea. Let's say Heinz Foods, let's say Hunt & Wesson. Okay. They all make a unique variety of different products, okay? But Hunt Wesson makes a mustard, okay? Heinz makes a mustard, okay? Gosh, I don't even know who Poupon makes. Grey Poupon makes a mustard. But they also make different varieties of things as well. I'm going to separate the process here a little bit. And so if we go to Lowe's here, the Lowe's, the grocery store, or if we go to Harris Teeter, what happens is that these goods come from Hunt & Wesson, Heinz, Grey Poupon, and what we find is that we can go to a shelf on Lowe's and Hunt & Wesson, and the mustards are all together in one place, all right? That is an enormous advantage. Instead of having to go to Heinz and Hunt & Wesson and Grey Poupon and looking at those goods independently, because one of the things that we desire, especially if we look at the categories of goods known as shopping goods, is that we desire to see goods together so that we can shop them. We need to be able to see differences. And as a matter of fact, these companies want you to see differences as well, because people buy not on how they're like everything else, they buy them on how they're different from everything else. And that's important. So being a marketing guy, I'm one of those strange individuals. When I go into a supermarkets, by the way, are just amazing. Yes, I'm that sick. I think supermarkets are really unique. So one of the things that I will do when I'm shopping for goods is I will look at the varieties of things that I will see in a given supermarket. Now, supermarkets have an average of between 39,000 different items and up to 151,000 of the so-called supermarkets, the mega stores, the hypermarkets, okay? And so we're talking about an enormous number of goods. Now, the interesting thing about Walmart is that Walmart has everything on their aisles that you would want to find. And so they have more mustards, of course, but they don't have the variety of mustards that you might see at a Harris Teeter. So I actually did this. I went into Walmart and I looked at the mustards, and there were like 17 varieties of different sizes and types of mustard. I went into the Harris Teeter and I found 78 different varieties and sizes of mustard. Yes, now you can tell your parents that I have a teacher that looks at mustard and said, they can go, who is that sick person? Yes, I'm you. But I do this because it's important for you to understand. I have a mission, folks, and that's to find out where I can buy the most mustard. Anyway, so the sorting is extremely important for the consumer because it does also facilitate the search process as well. By breaking those goods down into homogeneous groups, it allows the consumer to be able to find things quicker and more efficiently. And also what it does is that it gives the consumer one single place to go find everything that they're looking for. Academy Sports is not just something that sprang up. Academy Sports were there to fulfill an important function. They were to put together in one place as many different possible varieties of athletic equipment that you could possibly find. And as far as I'm concerned, they did a brilliant job, okay? And so sorting performs in a very, very important function. Now, what are the advantages to the upstream members, to the manufacturers? Well, the first one is the routinization of transactions. It's hard to say, okay? So one of the things that is, well, let's just say time consuming and expensive is the thought that every time a corporation has to order something from let's just say the manufacturer, whoever the originator is, they have to order something. Basically what they have to do is they have to generate a new order one at a time. And so Walmart does the same thing. Walmart will generate orders for different items. Well, the difficulty with that is that if it's a unique transaction, the buyer and seller have to agree to an amount, the mode, and the timing of the payment all the time, okay? Now, the more transactions they do, the more things you do over and over again, many times doing those same transactions over and over will lead to inefficiencies, okay? What you hope to do is standardize everything, because in standardizing it, you get the economies of scale of efficiencies because it's the same thing over and over again. And so what Walmart did in the early 90s, along with all of their computerization, is they started what was known as the Continuous Replenishment Program, the CRP, all right? And so how does this work? So what Walmart does is that Walmart states to one of their vendors, we will buy a total of 50,000 of this individual item in a given year. But this is the price we always want it, and we don't want all 50,000 at one time. However, when we get to a minimum buy where we need to restock the shelves, we will automatically open up a purchase order or the same purchase order at the same price, and we'll ask for, let's say, another 10,000. And this is what the continuous replenishment system does. For Walmart as an advantage, it means that Walmart does not have to stock its central warehouses with the same goods. It means that, in essence, the manufacturers are storing those goods for Walmart and will deliver them to Walmart whenever Walmart asks for it, okay? Walmart actually, in the way that they do things as well, Walmart is probably the biggest consignment store in the world. There are many things that Walmart does not pay for until the consumer actually buys them, okay? So just to go over that again, there are many things inside of Walmart that Walmart stocks, but they don't pay for until the consumer buys them. And that, in essence, is what a consignment store does, all right? When Walmart pays for those items, they do it generally net 45. So what does that mean? It means that net 45 means that they will pay in 45 days, not the normal 30 days. So what it means is that Walmart gets 15 days more to play with that money. We'll talk about that when we talk about other things that benefit corporations. But just think about the billions of dollars that Walmart gets to float for 15 days. And it gives you an idea of the enormous advantages. This also goes into the concepts of power, okay, because we'll talk about power as well. But in terms of a benefit to an upstream member, routinization of transactions is an enormous benefit, not only for the fact that we don't get to stock those shelves, but I don't have to do the same transaction and renegotiate over and over again. Along with this routinization of transaction, there is another thing that adds to efficiency, and that is the concept of fewer contacts. What does this mean? It means that with fewer contacts, the fewer number of transactions and the fewer number of possible market exchanges that you have to go through. And so how do I show what that means? Let me show you on the next slide. Okay, so I kind of want you to think of it this way. Think of these manufacturers, let's say, they're the sin things. Let's talk about their beer, cigarettes, and candy. Let's put it that way. And those are what the manufacturers are. And let's say the retailers are mom and pop stores in North Carolina, okay? So the mom and pop stores are convenience stores. They are only able to handle a certain limited number of items. If those mom and pop stores were to have to negotiate directly, let's say with Mars Candy, let's say to go directly to, Philip Morris, and let's say directly with Miller Beer. Let's use those as ones. It means that every mom and pop store would have to negotiate with every one of those particular corporations. They'd have to draw up contracts for those individuals. And then realize this is that when those manufacturers make goods, they make them in enormous quantities, all right? And so it wouldn't be simply enough for the mom and pop store. They could not buy in the minimum buy sizes that the manufacturers would want to sell them at, okay? However, if there was one wholesaler and that one wholesaler took care of all of, I call them the sin goods, so you might as well call them that. But let's say there's one wholesaler, let's say in Western North Carolina, and they basically have contracts with Miller and with Mars and with Philip Morris, and they buy in enormous quantities and then resell to the mom and pop retailers. Then what it does for the manufacturers is that the manufacturers only have one line of contact, and that's with the wholesaler. The retailers in turn only have one line of contact with one wholesaler, and that's the advantages as well. But the other thing that the retailers do is instead of buying in enormous quantities from all of those, they could buy perhaps just, a stack or a skid of, let's say, soft drinks. They could buy a skid of, let's say, cigarettes, instead of buying the enormous sizes that would be required in order to meet the minimum buys. The wholesalers, where they would make their money on, is they would make their money on performing the function of breaking bulk for these smaller manufacturers. And it's a win situation. It means that the retailers don't have to take enormous risks with money that they don't have. It means that the manufacturers don't have to create all of these contact points with these smaller ones. And even if you're talking about two wholesalers, let's just say one is for beer and perhaps one is for soft drinks, you still reduce the number of contact points as well. It is a better and a more efficient system. The mom and pops are able to do well. They sell themselves on the convenience of those goods. I mean, mom and pops even, of course, you've gone into it and see they generally sometimes they'll have like canned goods there as well. But how many, oh, I don't know, how many cans of Vienna sausage can they possibly sell? I mean, not enough to warrant trying to go to Hormel Meats and buying enormous quantities. It doesn't work that way. However, with this, being able to reduce the number of contact points, it makes the whole arrangement that much easier and that much more successful, okay? And so we have advantages for the downstream member for channels, and we have advantages for the upstream channels. You know, I'm about to get into something real sticky here, and this is going to require all of your attention. And so I am going to break off early for today. When we come back, we're going to talk about the key functions that the marketing channels perform. We'll talk about how we go about auditing the channels, and we'll talk about the efficiency template. And then I believe we're coming up very soon on the first test. I think next Thursday. I'll have to look that up, okay? But we're into the woods here on some pretty important things. So let's break where we are now, and we'll come back Thursday bright and early, and we'll finish this up, okay, folks? No dissenting voices, so I guess it's okay. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Emily.